If you want to learn how to make a popover like this one that opens and closes with a different transition for when it's opening and closing and no JavaScript at all involved, well then you're in the right place. All right, so let's dive in here. First thing we're going to look at is I have my article, I have this div, whatever, it doesn't matter. The important thing is the button that I have right here that I put an outline on it just so we can see it. And if I come all the way down over here, near the bottom somewhere, I have this author popover div. This is sitting like completely separate from everything else. This is one of the cool things with these is you can literally put them anywhere. It will not have an impact on accessibility for the flow of stuff. People will be able to get into it through keyboard and everything. So you put the popovers where you need them to be. If it makes more sense to put it somewhere else in the DOM, you can, but I just wanted to show that we could do this. And the important thing is I have this popover attribute on here. If I remove that, first of all, do this to style it because that will actually let you see it. As soon as you put this popover attribute on there, it vanishes into the ether. It's still there, just we can't see it. It's hidden away. There's some user agent styles making sure that we can't see it, including a display none on there. So what we want is when I click the button, we want that popover to show up. So how do we do that? Well, because this has an ID on it of author popover, and I have my popover on there, all I need to do on my button is come here and I write popover target. And let's just put this on another line so we can see it. So I do a popover target and I just say is equal to, and in this case it was author popover. If you have multiple ones, you might, you're adding this in via JS somehow, whether it's server-side rendered or whatever, you could have like the actual name. So each button is targeting a different popover. And just by having this on here, if I click on that, it opens. And I can click anywhere to dismiss it. So it's a light dismiss, clicking anywhere dismisses it. If I push escape, it also dismisses it. And just to show you, once I click into it, my focus is inside of that now. So if you have other focusable things, as soon as it's opened, the first thing you will get to is inside of there, as you would expect. So that's an important thing to know about, even though it's later on in the DOM, right? So this works. It doesn't look very good though. So you probably want to style these a bit differently. There's some interesting user agent styles that are on here that can actually, for the way you want popovers to generally work, I'm not a huge fan of the user agent styles, but they're worth looking at because you'll see here there's a display of block. There's an overlay of auto with an important on there. That means you cannot get rid of that. It's impossible to overwrite a user agent style that has important on it. But it doesn't matter, you want that on there anyway. You can also see it's using position fixed. It has a position anchor of auto. That's really interesting. We'll talk more about what that means in a minute. We have the width of fit content, a height of fit content. So it's fitting the content. It has some default colors that are the canvas text and canvas. Inset of 0 because it's positioned with a margin of auto, which is why it's centered. A lot of these things you don't want, especially because of this position anchor of auto that's on there. And so, yeah, let's sort of dive through and fix this, fix this up a little bit. And actually, I'm going to put a link to an article from Manuel, who I'm not even going to try and say his last name, but he has a CSS reset that he's created or base. I don't know. He talked about it during CSS Day recently, but in there, he actually has like a smart reset type of thing you might want to apply for popovers that stop some of the default styles from sort of getting in the way. So the first thing I'm going to say is, though, make sure that you don't do a display here. So say you need display grid on this, which I am going to be using grid on here. The problem with throwing display grid on there is you overwrite that user agent style of display none. So it means it never disappears. Like I'm clicking, this should be gone. I'm pushing escape. You cannot get rid of it. So you could throw this on there to style it, make it look good. But once you've done that, just make sure you take the display off. And we'll talk more about where you put the display in a second. But I'm going to paste these styles in here just to give myself a little bit of a sane starting point. So if I click on here, it opens up and it looks a little bit better. It's still centered on the page though, which is probably not what you want. It's not the end of the world. Maybe you like that and that's completely fine if that's the case. And it is using position fixed. So it'll sort of stay in that space. But we saw with those user agent styles, there's the inset of 0, which means top, bottom, left, and right of 0, and a margin of auto. And because I've given it a size, it's just perfectly centered in the viewport. Again, maybe that's what you want. But I think this is sort of the things that I would often overwrite here would be to actually say that it has a margin of 0 and an inset of auto. And doing that means now when it opens, it's opening top right. Now, again, this isn't perfect. Popovers have slightly better support than anchor positioning, so I'm going to be using anchor positioning in this one, which is one of those funny things. I actually have it here, where it's going to say limited availability across major browsers, but it's in all the major browser engines. And it's just because it's kind of buggy for some stuff, and they're still fixing things as far as I know, because it's, yeah, a really weird one in terms of that. But so this could be something where you use the default positioning. Maybe we'll do that. Let's do that. I'm talking about it. Let's show you how to do that. So we could say is at supports. Let's just say anchor name of anchor. And then we could put in, not all of that, our margin of 0 and our inset of auto. And so that means if this is supported, we'll be able to do our anchor positioning on it. If this isn't supported, right, that means, let's just comment that out. If it's not supported, it doesn't really break and it just opens in the middle of their screen. So I think a nice little compromise there for a progressive enhancement along the way. Now, I actually want it to like link to where my red button thing is there though, right? When we click it, it should be a line there. And this is where that anchor name of auto is really cool because it has an implicit anchor to the thing that triggered it and opened it. So this button, it's automatically anchored to this button. So if I have an inset of auto, which just basically means inset of nothing. And now what I can do is come in here and say position area. And I'm going to say this is going to be on the bottom. And because it has that implicit anchor, when I click there, it's on the bottom of my red thing. It's coming out on top of the red line because I used an outline instead of a border. But yeah, it's set up on the bottom. Maybe I don't want it touching the left of the screen. We could add margins around this. I said margin 0. Maybe I want margin of 1, just so it's pushed off in every direction by a little bit. Super cool, right? And it's just there. Or maybe I want it to come up on the side over here. I could just say position area is on the right. And then when I click on there, it opens up on the right side. Awesome. So cool that this works. But let's say we wanted it not to open to the right, but we actually want it to open to the top. If I do that and I click this, it actually covers it because it's trying not to let it overflow, right? It would stick off the screen if not. It's not the end of the world because it's a light dismiss, so it's easy to get rid of, but it's kind of weird that it covered the content that opened it. So, and that's because we're close to the top. But maybe I want it to open to the top most of the time because let's say there's other stuff on the page. Let's bring this padding block in here. So if I click on that, it's on the top. This makes sense. But then we run in, that sort of sucks. And if I click on it now it covers, that's kind of awkward. So what we can do here is a position try and say flip block because we're trying to open on the top. I actually want it to flip and open on the bottom. So if I do that, it opens, but look at this. As soon as it runs out of space, it flips over. Boop. That's already pretty cool. But that also means that if I open it, it's opening on the bottom right away because there wasn't enough room on the top. It's so cool that we can do this. I also have a margin of 1, but let's say I only did the margin on the bottom of 1, right? Because when I was first styling it, I just wanted that margin space here. Not all properties, but some properties will flip along with it. So the margin bottom, when this flips to the other one, is actually putting the margin on the top instead. And of course, this would be the same if I did a block end, we'd get the exact same result. So we get the block end margin, and then that margin follows through here. And of course, we probably don't want it touching the side of the page. So what we could do is we want position area at top, span to the right. And that means now it's going to line up with the left side more and span all the way across that way. So top, but spanning towards the right side, which is a nice little touch that we can add to it. Cool. There's a lot more to anchor positioning. I'm going to put links down below if you want to dive into more, including articles. And I don't know if I've done a video on it. I don't think I have, but I might have. If I have, I'll put the link to that as well. But there's going to be some stuff from Oddbird that goes into so much more we can do with anchor positioning. It is a huge topic. But what I want to look at now is when we click this or dismiss it or bring it in, don't want it just to appear. We want it to do something a little prettier. So to be able to do that, what we're going to do, oh, I did want to mention something, display grid. Before we move on, popovers. I said that if you want to change the display type because you want some styling here, where you want to do that is in the end, popover-open, which is a new pseudo class that we have. So it's when the author popover is opened, we can do a change your display type there. So if you want flex or grid, I'm going to do a grid template columns of an auto 1FR. And I think we probably want a gap in there too, gap 1 rem. The gap could live anywhere, but the display property is the one. So now I get my 2 columns coming in. Wanted to mention that. So popover-open is what it looks like when it's open. And the reason I thought of that is because I said I wanted to animate everything. So normally we can't do a transition or animation between a display of none, which it has by default, and a display of block, but we can, or grid or anything else. Now we can do that. So let's say by default, we want this to actually have an opacity of 0 because we want it to fade in. It has the display none there. You could declare it. I'm not going to, but you know what? Let's put it display none. It's redundant, but just to be explicit about what's happening, we're going from a display none with an opacity of 0. And let's add a translate down. I always get these mixed up. So X is first, so 0. I'm going to do 30 pixels here. The only other thing I need here is an opacity of 1, so we can actually see it when it's opened. So if I click on that, yeah, it's translated down a little bit. And I'll fix this once we bring in this next step, which is to do, I'm trying to think, there's 2 different properties and I always mix them up. But we're going to do a transition. So transition, we need to transition our display type. We want to transition our overlay, which is, I don't know if we actually need to include it here, but I'm going to put it anyway. The overlay, we saw that that was the thing that had the important on it in the dev tools. And you need it for popovers and for modals when it's anything that's using top layer. And that's the other thing with popovers is they use a top layer, so you don't have to worry about z-index issues. It's always going to be on top until you start dealing with multiple popovers and multiple things on the top layer. We're going to say display, overlay, and our opacity, and our translate are all going to be the different things that we do. So let's just say this is our transition property. Right, so we're going to do all of those, but then the reason I'm doing these separately is just so we can give them all the same timing. So transition duration, instead of repeating it over and over again, let's just say this will be for demo purposes. We'll make it slow and then speed it up. And the last thing that's really important is our transition behavior. And this is going to be a allow discrete. I think this is the one that I mix up sometimes, but display is something that allows for discrete animations. And what a discrete animation is something like a display type that it doesn't have anything to interpolate in between the 2 states. So it has to just jump at one point, which traditionally speaking, transitions just meant it wouldn't do it, right? It would just instantly switch. With an animation, it was a bit different. It would happen at, I think, the 50% point. So a transition behavior allow discrete, by doing it is the longhand for each of these. It means it's applying it to all of these, which it doesn't really change anything for opacity or our translate, but it does, or it is required for our display and our overlay here. So now you can see there, it works not that way, but when I dismiss, it is working. My translate, we're also going to do, that's weird actually. I see it jumping in a weird way. Oh, the display is doing something weird there too. We'll figure that one out. The display type, the grid is going away in an unexpected way. That's an interesting one. We'll figure that one out. But we can see at least it's fading away. So to get around this, because of the way what's happening is it's instantly putting the display type on. But when you go from display none to display something, it's there all of a sudden. So it's not coming in with the opacity of 0 or this translate that we've put on there. It's just coming in existing. And so it doesn't realize any of the properties that were applied to it previously. So to fix that, on our popover open, we come in with an @starting style. And this has to come last. Very, very important, the order here, which can feel a little bit weird, but we do our @starting style. And our @starting style will be an opacity of 0 and a translate of, and I'm going to use the same one we did here, but this is where starting style can actually get kind of interesting because they don't have to be the same. So now when I click on this, it's going to appear. And then when I click away, it will disappear. Now there's a few weird things happening that we will figure out why the layout is changing, but we can see it's working in both directions. The last thing I want here is a translate of 0 pixels, 0 pixels. Because when I click on it, I want it to sort of slide up a little bit. And then when I click away, I want it to slide back down. It's kind of weird, right? This sort of makes sense. We're coming from the button. It's too slow, but it's coming up. But then when I close it, I want this to be different. I want it to sort of fade away upward. So that's why the starting style is cool. We can do different opening and closing animations. So it's going to slide up that way. And when I click here, it's going to slide on up that way. Now, why is the display not working as intended? And I discovered the problem. Very silly of me, but I set the display grid here, which has to be here. The problem is when it's opening, it has all of those things on it. But when I close, this is only when it's open, and we're not transitioning our gap or our grid template columns. So these actually need to be always there. So the popover opened, we have a gap, we have a grid template columns, and that means when we're closing it, well, the grid is still there on that transition outwards, it's keeping those applied. I mentioned we could include them up there. So that's one of those like gotchas that can come along. So there we go, it works that way, and it holds those styles as it fades off. Little gotcha that can come up there, which might even be worthy of having a comment if you're playing around with this, right? So if you're creating this, leaving a comment here could be useful for your future self or your coworkers. And now I think we have that set up. So let's just fix this transition duration, because 2 seconds is really fast. Maybe we're going to do 0.75 or something, which is probably still kind of slow, but I think that's pretty good, especially because it can be interacted with right away. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. There we go. And as I said, let's get rid of that, do the outline. And with that gone, we have a nice little thing. It pops up, it switches axes if there's not enough room. It's not doing it on the bottom, but if we ran out of room on the bottom, it would flip around the other way. It opens and closes. So I hope you enjoyed this video, learned a few things along the way. And I want to say a very big thank you to my enabler of Awesome Johnny, as well as all my other patrons and channel members for their continued support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.